Commander Alan Shepard rubbed his tired eyes as he sat at his station in the lunar deep space listening post. The large room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the occasional beep from monitoring equipment. His shift had been long and boring, just like most days at the base. For 3 years, he had listened to the empty noise of space, hoping to find something interesting. Today was supposed to be just another ordinary day, but it wasn't. At exactly 3:27 a.m. Earth Standard Time, all the systems suddenly lit up. A strange signal poured through their receivers, unlike anything they had ever detected before. Alan jumped to his feet, his heart racing as he called out to the other night shift workers. "Everyone, I need all hands on this signal right now." The team rushed to their stations. Elizabeth Grant, the chief communications specialist, was the first to reach Alan's side. Her eyes widened as she looked at the patterns on the screen. "This isn't random space noise," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "These patterns are too regular, too structured. This is a message." Alan nodded. "And it's not one of ours." Within minutes, the entire night team was working on the mysterious signal. They sent an urgent alert to Earth headquarters and began running it through their translation systems. The advanced computers worked for hours, trying to make sense of the alien data. Elizabeth stayed focused on her screen, not even stopping for coffee. By morning, her hands were shaking, but not from tiredness. What she saw made her blood run cold. "Ellen," she called out, "you need to see this right now." The commander walked over to her station. On her screen were clear images of Earth, detailed scans of their military bases, power plants, major cities, and defense systems, all neatly organized as if for a military briefing. "This isn't just any message," Elizabeth said. "It's an invasion plan." As the day went on, more of the signal was decoded. It came from something calling itself the hegemony of unified worlds, a massive empire that ruled thousands of star systems across the galaxy. The message contained ship movements, troop numbers, and a timeline. Earth was their next target, and according to the data, they had less than 1 year before the attack would begin. By afternoon, the base was in chaos. Government officials and military leaders from around the world connected through secure video links. The lunar team explained what they had found over and over again, showing the evidence that left no room for doubt. Earth was in grave danger. President Laura Wilson's face appeared on the main screen of the command center. Her expression was serious as she addressed the team. "Commander Shepard, are you absolutely certain about this?" she asked. "Yes, Madam President," Alan replied. "We've triple-checked everything. This is real. An alien empire has targeted Earth for invasion." The president turned to someone off-screen, then looked back at the camera. "What are our chances against this level of technology?" General Jack Murphy stepped into view beside the president. He had been the head of Earth's defense forces for 15 years and was not a man who scared easily. Today, he looked scared. "Madam President," he said, "based on what we're seeing in these plans, their technology is centuries ahead of ours. Their ships can cross between stars. Their weapons could destroy our cities from orbit." He paused. "In a direct fight, we don't stand a chance." The room fell silent. The weight of his words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Then Elizabeth spoke up. "But there's something important here," she said, pointing to her screen. "The hegemony has a strict chain of command. These plans are being sent for approval to their central leadership. They don't know we've intercepted this message." Alan suddenly understood what she meant. He stood up straight, a small spark of hope lighting up in his mind. "They don't know that we know they're coming," he said. "And that might be the only advantage we have." President Wilson nodded slowly. "Then we need to use that advantage while we still can. I'm calling an emergency meeting of all world leaders. Commander Shepard, I want you and your team ready to present everything you have in 6 hours." As the screen went dark, Alan looked around at his team. They were just ordinary people, scientists, engineers, and communications experts. None of them had signed up to save the world from alien invasion. But now, Earth's survival might depend on what they did next. The signal had changed everything. The countdown to invasion had begun. 3 days after the signal was discovered, the world's top scientists, military leaders, and government officials gathered in a secret underground facility beneath the Rocky Mountains. The room was filled with tense faces and worried whispers. At the center of it all stood NASA Director Daniel Ross, a tall man with gray hair and determined eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice echoing in the large concrete room, "welcome to Project Harbinger." On the large screen behind him appeared images of the alien signal and what they had learned from it. The pictures showed massive ships, powerful weapons, and star maps marking Earth as a target. "We have less than a year before the hegemony fleet reaches our solar system," Daniel continued. "And as General Murphy has already explained, we cannot win in a direct battle." A young woman stood up from her seat. Dr. Olivia Martinez was not supposed to be there. Until last week, her research on faster-than-light travel was considered too theoretical, too far-fetched to receive serious funding. Now, it might be Earth's only hope. "Director Ross," she said, "I studied the signal's properties, and I believe we can use similar technology to send a message back." The room erupted with questions and doubtful comments. Daniel raised his hand for silence. "Let Dr. Martinez explain her idea," he said. Olivia stepped forward and took control of the presentation screen. She showed diagrams of a small probe designed to travel faster than light. "We can build a device that uses the same principles as their communication technology," she explained. "It won't be big enough to carry people, but it could deliver a message to the hegemony leadership." "What kind of message?" asked President Wilson, who sat in the front row. General Murphy stood up. "A warning," he said. "We show them that we've discovered their plans, that we know they're coming. We make them think twice about attacking us." "That's just a bluff," someone shouted from the back. "They'll still know we're defenseless." "Not entirely," Olivia replied. She changed the screen to show designs for a theoretical weapon. "Based on what we've learned from their signal, their faster-than-light systems have a weakness. We can claim we've developed a weapon that can disable their FTL network." The room fell silent again as everyone considered the implications. Without their FTL technology, the hegemony would be stranded, their vast empire suddenly too big to control. "Have you actually built such a weapon?" President Wilson asked. Olivia shook her head. "No, Madam President, but we can make them believe we have." It was a desperate plan, built on a massive bluff. But as the meeting continued, it became clear it was the only plan they had. Outside the meeting room, something even more remarkable was happening. For the first time in human history, former enemies were working together. Russian scientists collaborated with American engineers. Chinese military officers shared information with European commanders. The threat from beyond the stars had accomplished what centuries of diplomacy could not: true global unity. Admiral Richard Peterson, who had once led fleets against some of the same nations he now worked with, took charge of Earth's combined military forces. "We need to prepare as if the bluff will fail," he told his international team of officers. "Every ship, every plane, every weapon on this planet needs to be ready." Meanwhile, Olivia's team moved into a hidden laboratory deep within the mountain. They worked day and night, trying to turn theoretical physics into working technology. The progress was slow, and many tests failed. "What you're asking would normally take decades," Olivia told Daniel Ross after a particularly frustrating day. "We don't have decades," he replied simply. "We have months." As world leaders prepared their people for the possibility of war without revealing the alien threat, President Wilson addressed the United Nations. "The challenges we face may seem overwhelming," she said, carefully choosing words that could apply to climate change or economic troubles without mentioning aliens. "But they also present an opportunity for humanity to stand together as never before." Behind the scenes, resources poured into Project Harbinger. The probe began to take shape, a small vessel designed for a one-way journey to deliver a message that might save mankind. No one knew if it would work, but as Daniel Ross looked at the half-built probe, he allowed himself to feel a small spark of hope. "We're coming for you," he whispered, as if the distant aliens could hear him. "And we're not as helpless as you think." The probe was almost ready. In just 2 months, Dr. Martinez and her team had built something that should have taken years. The sleek silver craft sat in the center of the underground hangar, surrounded by engineers making final adjustments. They called it Cassandra, after the figure from Greek myths who could see the future but was never believed. But there was still one big problem. The automated systems aren't reliable enough, Dr. Martinez explained to the project leaders. The probe might need to adapt to unexpected situations. It needs a human pilot. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The energy needed for the faster-than-light jump was enormous. They could only generate enough power for a one-way trip. "Whoever goes won't be coming back," General Murphy said, putting into words what everyone was thinking. Director Ross nodded slowly. "We need volunteers." Within hours, hundreds of pilots, astronauts, and soldiers had stepped forward, willing to give their lives for Earth's survival. But only one person had both the flying skills and the language expertise needed for the mission. Major Susan Clark was 34 years old, with short brown hair and steady hands that never shook, even during the most difficult flying tests. She had degrees in both aeronautical engineering and linguistics, and had spent the last 5 years studying how language patterns could be used to understand alien communication. "I understand the risks," she told the selection committee. "I know I won't be coming back." 2 days later, Susan sat in a small room with Dr. Martinez, going over the final details of the mission. "Once you reach the Hegemony headquarters, you'll broadcast this message," Olivia explained, showing her a data file. "It contains evidence that we've intercepted their invasion plans, along with technical details of our supposed FTL disruption weapon." Susan studied the information carefully. "Do you really think they'll believe we have this technology?" Olivia sighed. "The weapon designs are theoretically sound. If I had a few years, I might actually be able to build it. All we need is for them to take the threat seriously enough to reconsider their attack." Susan nodded. It was a slim chance, but it was all they had. The next day, Susan began her final preparations. She recorded messages for her parents and her younger brother, knowing they might never learn her true fate. To protect the secret of the alien threat, her family would only be told she died in a classified training accident. As she finished recording, there was a knock on her door. It was Admiral Peterson. "Major Clark," he said, his voice grave. "We've detected movement. The Hegemony has sent scout ships into the outer solar system. They're moving faster than we expected." Susan's heart raced. "How long do we have?" "Days, not weeks. You need to launch tomorrow." That night, Susan couldn't sleep. She sat by the small window in her quarters, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, an alien empire was preparing to destroy everything she had ever known. By this time tomorrow, she would be heading toward those same stars, carrying mankind's desperate message. The launch day arrived bright and clear. The probe had been moved to a secret facility in the desert, far from curious eyes. As Susan walked toward the craft in her flight suit, she passed rows of military personnel standing at attention. They were saluting her, a final honor for someone on a one-way mission. Dr. Martinez met her at the entrance to the probe. "We've loaded everything we can to help you survive as long as possible after arrival," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "The automated systems will handle the jump itself." Susan nodded. "Thank you, Olivia, for everything." As she climbed into the craft's small cockpit, Director Ross spoke through her headset. "Major Clark, on behalf of every person on Earth, I thank you for your courage." Susan secured her harness and began the pre-launch sequence. The probe hummed to life around her. T-minus 60 seconds came the countdown in her ears. Susan took a deep breath. She thought of her family, of the blue oceans and green forests of Earth, of all the people going about their daily lives, not knowing the danger that was coming. T-minus 30 seconds. The probe's engines began to power up, filling the cockpit with a blue glow. T-minus 10, 9, 8. Susan's hand hovered over the final launch button. 3, 2, 1. She pressed the button and felt the craft surge with energy. As the experimental FTL drive engaged, Susan's final transmission reached the control room. For Earth. And then, in a flash of light, she was gone. Susan opened her eyes slowly. Her head hurt, and her vision was blurry. According to the mission plan, the journey to the Hegemony headquarters would take 3 weeks in jump space. But the clock on the probe's dashboard showed that only 3 days had passed. Something had gone wrong. As her vision cleared, Susan looked out through the view screen and froze. Instead of arriving near the Hegemony's central planet, Cassandra had emerged in the middle of an enormous fleet of warships. Hundreds of massive vessels surrounded the tiny probe, their sleek metallic hulls gleaming in the light of an unfamiliar star. Navigation error, Susan whispered to herself. We're in the wrong place. A red light began flashing on her control panel. The probe's sensors had detected an energy field wrapping around them. Some kind of tractor beam. One of the alien ships was pulling them in. Susan had only minutes to act. She quickly activated the automated transmission system. If she couldn't reach the Hegemony leadership directly, she would broadcast Earth's warning to every ship in range. Cassandra, begin transmission on all frequencies, she commanded. The probe beeped in response as it began sending the carefully prepared message. We have decoded your invasion plans. Earth is prepared. We possess technology that can disable your FTL network. Reconsider your aggression, or face consequences beyond your assessment capabilities. Along with the words, the probe transmitted technical details of the theoretical weapon that Earth had threatened to use, the one that didn't actually exist yet. Susan watched as the warship drew her closer. The probe shuddered as it passed through some kind of energy field and into a vast hangar bay. Dozens of strange creatures moved around outside, pointing at the human craft. At least the message got out, Susan thought. She prepared herself for capture or death. Her mission was complete. She had delivered the warning. To her surprise, the aliens didn't immediately attack the probe. Instead, a communication channel opened automatically. On the small screen in her cockpit appeared a face that wasn't what she expected. Instead of a military officer in uniform, she saw a creature with pale blue skin and large, intelligent eyes. It wore elaborate civilian clothing with what looked like official symbols. How did primitives from a border world obtain our military assessments? The alien demanded. Its words were automatically translated by the probe systems. Susan recognized from the creature's markings that this was no ordinary officer. She was speaking to someone in a position of high authority. I am Administrator Vexarn of the Hegemony's Inner Council, the alien continued. Explain yourself, human. Susan's mind raced. This was an unexpected opportunity. She was speaking directly to a member of the Hegemony's leadership. She needed to make her bluff as convincing as possible. The same way we developed the capability to send this probe, Susan replied, trying to sound confident. Your military has underestimated us. The assessment you received about Earth is fatally flawed. The alien's eyes narrowed. Impossible. Your world has been under observation for decades. You have no FTL capability. Yet here I am, Susan said. Light years from Earth in a ship of our own design. What Susan didn't realize was that her arrival had interrupted a critical meeting aboard the command ship. The Inner Council had gathered to give final approval for Earth's invasion. Her sudden appearance, in a craft using technology the humans shouldn't possess, had thrown their carefully planned meeting into chaos. The weapon you claim to have, Vexarn said after a long pause, it would target our jump nodes. Yes, Susan replied, remembering her briefing. We can disable the entire network that your empire depends on. Earth prefers peace, but we will defend ourselves if attacked. Susan could see other aliens gathering behind Vexarn, arguing among themselves. She had created exactly the confusion that Earth's leaders had hoped for. Suddenly, alarms began blaring through her craft. The probe's external sensors showed armed soldiers cutting through the hull. They would reach her within minutes. Susan knew what she had to do. She activated the probe's final protocol, transmitting the complete technical specifications of their theoretical FTL disruption weapon directly into the Hegemony's central database. Whether the weapon was real or not, the Hegemony would now have to take the threat seriously. As the hull breach warnings flashed red around her, Susan smiled grimly. "Mission accomplished," she whispered. The last thing she saw before armored soldiers burst into her cockpit was Vexarn's face on the screen, showing what she could only interpret as fear. 3 months passed on Earth with no sign of the alien invasion fleet. In the underground facility beneath the Colorado mountains, tension grew with each passing day. Had Major Clark's mission failed? Was the Hegemony still coming? Admiral Peterson stood before a wall of screens showing Earth's hastily prepared defenses, new satellite networks, experimental weapons, and combined military forces from every nation stood ready. But would any of it matter against an enemy that could cross the stars? "Any update from the deep space monitors?" he asked a nearby officer. "Nothing, sir. No unusual activity detected beyond Neptune's orbit." The admiral nodded. "Maintain alert status. They could arrive at any moment." In another section of the facility, Dr. Martins and her team worked frantically. What had begun as a bluff was now a desperate race to create real technology. "If we claimed we could disrupt their FTL network," she told her exhausted team, "we damn well better figure out how to actually do it." The scientists had been working around the clock, studying the alien signal and trying to develop a working prototype of the weapon they had only theorized about. Progress was slow, but they were no longer starting from zero. Each day brought them closer to turning their bluff into reality. President Wilson held daily briefings with world leaders who had been brought into the secret. Some were starting to doubt. "It's been 3 months," said the British Prime Minister during a secure video call. "Perhaps we misinterpreted the signal. Perhaps there is no invasion coming." "Or perhaps," said the Russian president, "this Major Clark succeeded. Perhaps her warning worked." Before Wilson could respond, an aide rushed into the room and handed her a note. Her eyes widened as she read it. "We have contact," she announced. "A single alien vessel has entered Earth orbit." Within hours, the world's military forces were on highest alert. Fighter jets scrambled, missile systems activated, and submarines moved into strategic positions. Everyone expected an attack. But the alien ship made no aggressive moves. Instead, it sent a message requesting permission to land. It identified itself as a diplomatic vessel carrying Ambassador Krulliver of the Hegemony. "It could be a trick," General Murphy warned during the emergency meeting. "Or it could be our first chance for real contact," countered Director Ross. After hours of debate, President Wilson made her decision. "We will allow them to land, but with every possible security measure in place." The landing site was prepared in a remote desert area. Heavily armed troops surrounded the perimeter, and hidden weapons were aimed at the landing pad from all directions. When the alien ship descended from the clouds, a sleek vessel that seemed to shimmer with an inner light, everyone held their breath. The ship landed softly, and for several minutes nothing happened. Then a door opened, and Ambassador Krulliver stepped out. The alien was tall and slender, with blue skin and large eyes that took in everything. It wore elaborate robes marked with symbols of authority. "I come in peace," the alien said, its words translated through a device it carried. "I seek audience with your leaders." 24 hours later, in a heavily guarded conference room, President Wilson sat across from the alien ambassador. The meeting was being broadcast to secure rooms where other world leaders watched. "We hoped our warning would be taken seriously," Wilson said, maintaining the bluff with perfect conviction. "War benefits neither of our peoples." The ambassador's large eyes studied her carefully. "Your warning was Unexpected. No lesser world has ever detected our plans before an invasion. The military assured us your planet had no faster-than-light capability. Yet your messenger arrived in a ship using principles similar to our own. What the humans didn't know was that Krelver's true mission wasn't peaceful at all. The diplomat had been sent to gather intelligence, to determine if humans truly possessed the FTL disruption technology they claimed. The entire hegemony depended on their transportation network. If humans could indeed disable it, they posed an existential threat to the Empire. As the meeting continued, intelligence analyst Kevin Wright was making a disturbing discovery in a different part of the facility. He had been monitoring communications between the ambassador's ship and distant space. Hidden within the diplomatic messages were coded transmissions that matched patterns from the original invasion plans. "Admiral," he said, rushing into Peterson's office, "the diplomatic mission is a trick. They're still planning to attack. They're just waiting to confirm our threat isn't real." As Peterson read the evidence, his face darkened. The deception worked both ways. While Earth bluffed about weapons they didn't have, the hegemony pretended peace while still planning war. Admiral Peterson called an emergency meeting as soon as he saw Kevin Wright's evidence. The young intelligence analyst stood nervously before Earth's military and political leaders, explaining what he had found. The patterns in these transmissions matched those in the original invasion plans, Kevin said, pointing to the data on the large screen. They're using the diplomatic mission to gather information while still planning to attack. President Wilson turned to her advisors. "We need to confront the ambassador immediately." 2 hours later, Ambassador Krelver was brought to a secure meeting room. The alien seemed calm until armed guards entered behind it, and President Wilson placed the evidence of the secret transmissions on the table. "You speak of peace while planning war," she said, her voice cold. "Explain yourself." For the first time, the ambassador's confident manner faltered. The alien's large eyes blinked rapidly, and its blue skin seemed to pale. "You continue to surprise us," Krelvor said finally. "No lesser world has ever decoded our secure transmissions." "We are not a lesser world," General Murphy replied. "And we warned you about underestimating us." The room fell silent. The standoff between human and alien seemed to stretch for ages. Then, something unexpected happened. The ambassador's shoulders slumped, and it let out a sound that the translation device interpreted as a sigh. "Your warning," Krelvor said, "did not reach our military headquarters as you intended." Everyone in the room tensed. Had Major Clark's sacrifice been in vain? "It reached our inner council," the ambassador continued, "during the final approval meeting for your world's conquest. You changed everything." Dr. Martinez, who had been silently observing from one side of the room, stepped forward. "What do you mean?" The ambassador's gaze swept around the room before settling on her. "The hegemony is not what you think. We are not a unified empire ruling through strength alone. We are a fragile coalition of thousands of conquered species, held together by fear and the myth of our invincibility." This revelation stunned everyone present. The seemingly all-powerful empire that threatened Earth was not as stable as it appeared. For centuries, Krelvor continued, many worlds have quietly questioned the hegemony's authority, but none dared to openly resist. Our military presented each conquest as inevitable, each new world as helpless before our power. The ambassador touched a device on its wrist, and a holographic image appeared above the table. It showed Major Susan Clark standing before what appeared to be some kind of court or council. Then your Major Clark arrived, in a vessel using technology you shouldn't possess, with warning of a weapon that could threaten our entire empire. To explain this failure, our military leaders had to reveal the truth, that they had lied about Earth's capabilities, just as they had lied about many worlds before. President Wilson stared at the image of Susan. "She's alive." "Yes, and she has become important." When the truth of the military's incompetence and corruption spread, it sparked something we have not seen in 1,000 years, a reform movement that is sweeping across the hegemony. Dr. Martinez looked at the data display with growing excitement. And the invasion plans for Earth. Cancelled, Krelvor said. Not because we fear your weapons, though we do, but because your world has become a symbol throughout our systems, proof that the military has been lying to maintain their power. As the implications of these words sank in, Director Ross spoke up. So your diplomatic mission is real, the ambassador finished. Though I was instructed to assess your actual capabilities, the military faction still has influence and pushed for this mission. They hope to prove your threat was a bluff to regain their standing. Kevin Wright, who had been analyzing the alien's words carefully, stepped forward again. You said the reform movement is spreading across the hegemony. Does that mean you support it? Krelvor's large eyes turned to him. Why do you think I just confirmed your suspicions instead of maintaining our deception? The old hegemony is dying. What replaces it will depend on worlds like yours. The room erupted with questions, but President Wilson raised her hand for silence. She looked at the image of Susan Clark, still floating above the table. We want our people back, she said firmly. All of them. That, said Ambassador Krelvor, is why I am really here. 1 year had passed since Major Susan Clark's desperate mission. The morning sun shone brightly on the new building that stood in the middle of what had once been an empty field in Switzerland. Its strange curved shape and shimmering walls marked it as not entirely of human design. Above the main entrance, 2 flags flew side by side. Earth's blue and white United Nations flag next to the purple and silver banner of the reformed hegemony. Inside the building, Earth's first official delegation prepared to board a ship that would take them to the hegemony's Central Assembly. President Wilson stood at a podium addressing the group of scientists, diplomats, and military officers who would represent humanity. 1 year ago, she said, we faced what seemed like certain extinction. Today, we stand at the beginning of a new chapter for both humanity and the thousands of worlds beyond our own. Among the delegation stood a woman whose return to Earth 3 months earlier had been celebrated around the world. Major Susan Clark, now wearing the formal uniform of Earth's new interstellar corps, looked different than she had before her mission. Her eyes held the knowledge of things no human had seen before, and a small scar ran along her jawline, a reminder of her time in hegemony custody. After the ceremony, Susan walked through the gardens outside the building with Dr. Martinez, who had become a close friend. Are you nervous about going back? Olivia asked. Susan smiled. Strangely, no. During those months I spent as their guest, I watched their entire society begin to change. The reform movement is real. What had happened after Susan's capture had become legend throughout the hegemony. When the military tried to execute her as a spy, reform-minded members of the Inner Council had intervened. Susan became living proof that the military had been lying about primitive worlds. Videos of her explaining Earth's history and culture had spread throughout the empire, challenging centuries of propaganda. The invasion of Earth had been permanently canceled, not because of military strength, but because of a political revolution that swept through the hegemony. The once feared empire was transforming into a more democratic federation, with reforms changing the lives of billions across thousands of worlds. As Susan and Olivia walked, they passed Ambassador Krelvor, who now permanently represented the hegemony on Earth. Major Clark, the alien, greeted her with the gesture of respect that had once been reserved only for the highest-ranking hegemony officials. The ship is ready whenever your delegation wishes to depart. Thank you, Ambassador, Susan replied, returning the gesture. We're looking forward to the journey. The technology exchange program that followed Earth's first contact had advanced human science by centuries. Clean energy, medical breakthroughs, and new materials transformed life on Earth. In return, the hegemony gained something they had lost in their millennia of conquest: innovation born of necessity and courage. Later that day, as the delegation's ship rose from Earth's surface, Susan watched her home planet shrink in the view screen. The blue and green world that had once seemed so vast now appeared small and fragile against the blackness of space. Captain Paul Bennett, the ship's commander, approached her. "Major Clark, we'll be making the jump to FTL in about 10 minutes. The ambassador suggested you might want to be on the bridge for the transition." Susan nodded. "I wouldn't miss it." On the bridge, the crew prepared for humanity's first official faster-than-light journey. Unlike Susan's desperate one-way trip in the Cassandra probe, this ship could travel back and forth between stars with ease, using technology shared by the reformed hegemony. As the countdown reached 0, Susan thought about how much had changed. 1 year ago, humanity had stood alone against an overwhelming threat. Now, they were taking their place among the stars. The stars outside the viewscreen stretched into lines of light as the FTL drive engaged. Susan felt a gentle push rather than the violent jolt she had experienced in the Cassandra. This was refined technology, safely harnessed. President Wilson joined her at the viewscreen. "Do you ever think about how differently this could have gone?" she asked quietly. Susan watched as the star lines streaked past. "Every day. But I prefer to think about how it did go. One morning, one chance taken." She smiled. "Sometimes that's all it takes to change everything." As Earth's first official starship carried them toward a future no one could have imagined, Susan knew the greatest adventure for humanity was just beginning. End.